Deep in the vast and mysterious heart of the African continent, where the Blue Nile winds like a golden vein through fertile lands and scorching deserts, an empire was born, whose name still echoes too rarely in the world's memory. An empire of astonishing power and beauty that dared to defy time and history. It invaded the legendary Pharaonic Egypt, subdued it, ruled it for a full 100 years without ever weakening, and carved its name into eternal stone. For that glorious century, kings of ebony skin sat upon the double throne of the pharaohs, wore the white and red crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, held the crook and flail, and were worshipped as living gods. These sovereigns built more pyramids than all the Egyptian pharaohs combined during their most prosperous eras. They raised bolder temples, carved more imposing statues, and breathed new African blood, deep and vibrant, into Egypt. And then, one day, this empire almost completely vanished from official history books. Its names were erased, its exploits downplayed, its wonders attributed to others. Why such deliberate silence? Why such organized oblivion? Because for centuries, European historians could not, or would not, accept that a black people from the unfathomable depths of Africa had ruled ancient Egypt, considered by many to be the very cradle of world civilization. Tonight, we will lift the veil of forgetting together. We will plunge into the sands of time to unearth the buried truth, the glorious, long-hidden truth of the Kushites. These black pharaohs who not only saved Egypt from inevitable collapse, but restored its original splendor and forever engraved upon it the indelible mark of the African soul. Close your eyes, take a deep breath. Let the fatigue of the day fade away. Relax every muscle in your body. And allow me to take you far south, to the sacred lands of Kush, where a forgotten civilization wrote one of the most beautiful chapters in human history. Chapter 1. The Seeds of Renaissance, the Birth of the African Kings, c. 1070-760 BC. Picture a warm, generous land where the Nile flows slowly between golden cliffs and lush palm groves. South of ancient Egypt's borders lies Nubia, a region the northern Egyptians called Kush, with a mixture of contempt and envy. There lived a proud people with deep ebony skin, athletic bodies forged by sun and labor, eyes shining with intelligence and age-old patience. They lived from agriculture, herding, fishing, but above all from trade. They descended the Nile laden with raw gold extracted from Nubian hills, finely carved ivory, black and white ostrich feathers, leopard skins, and precious ebony wood. To the Egyptians, they were merely suppliers, useful but inferior barbarians. But the Kushites were not fooled. They watched, they learned. Every time they sailed upriver to Thebes or Memphis to sell their goods, they silently admired. Colossal temples with papyrus-shaped columns seeming to touch the gods. Giant obelisks engraved with hieroglyphs telling eternal victories. Monumental statues of seated pharaohs gazing into infinity. The perfect organization of the state, scribes, priests, architects, engineers, disciplined armies, an entire world of fascinating complexity. And under the desert stars, in the councils of the elders, the question kept returning. Why couldn't we build this ourselves? Why must we forever remain mere spectators of others' greatness? It was in the great city of Kerma, ancient capital of Kush, that everything truly began. Kerma was already a powerful city for centuries. Palaces of mud brick with painted facades, temples with altars where milk, honey, and incense were offered. Bustling markets where Nubians, Egyptians, Puntites, and desert peoples met. There, the Kushite kings decided no longer to merely imitate, but to create. They built palaces with thick walls adorned with colorful friezes, temples with massive pylons, but with a profoundly African touch, vivid, audacious colors. Ochre red, sun yellow, intense lapis lazuli blue, statues with distinctly Negro features, full lips, broad noses, tightly curled or braided hair. Artistic motifs blending the Egyptian lotus with African totem animals, lions, leopards, giraffes, elephants. They did not copy slavishly. They appropriated, transformed, enriched. Then came Kashta, around 760 BC, a visionary king with piercing eyes and iron determination. He uttered a sentence that would change the course of history. We will no longer be content to imitate the Egyptians. We will become Egyptians better than they themselves. We will remind them what they have forgotten. True greatness. He sent his sons and the most promising young princes to study in Thebes, the holy city, the spiritual heart of Egypt. For years they lived among the priests of Amun, learned to read and write sacred hieroglyphs, mastered the complex rituals of divine worship, studied administration, architecture, medicine, astronomy. They returned to Nubia transformed, filled with knowledge, but above all driven by boundless ambition. Kashta gathered his sons and told them, "Look at Egypt today, divided, weak, corrupt. Pharaohs succeed one another like shadows, temples fall into ruin, sacred traditions are forgotten. The souls of the great pharaohs of the past, Khufu, Senusret, Thutmose, Rameses, weep in their tombs. It is time to do them justice. It is time to restore Egypt's lost glory, and we will be the ones to do it." It was an immense project, a vision that required not 1 year, but a whole century, and the first great actor of this renaissance was named Piye. Piye the Conqueror. The dream becomes reality. Piye inherited his father Kashta's throne with almost supernatural determination. Seated on his black stone throne in Napata, facing the sacred mountain of Gebel Bar Kal, which the Egyptians themselves considered the earthly dwelling of Amun, he never stopped gazing north. His eyes burned with sacred ambition. Egypt at that time was a broken kingdom. In the delta, weak Libyan dynasties quarreled for power. In the south, Theban princes fought among themselves. The country was cut into pieces, irrigation canals neglected, roads infested with bandits, temples looted. Egypt, once the beacon of the world, was slowly sinking into chaos. Piye gathered his generals and spoke these now famous words. "The great pharaohs of the past watch us from the afterlife and weep. We can no longer remain spectators. We will sail up the Nile, not to plunder, but to save, to restore, to resurrect the sacred land of Egypt. This will not be an ordinary conquest. It will be a divine mission." He then raised the greatest army Kush had ever known. 20,000 elite Nubian warriors, tall, muscular, carrying shields of hippopotamus hide and copper-tipped spears. Legendary archers capable of shooting arrows over 200 meters with deadly precision. Squadrons of light chariots drawn by swift desert horses. And above all, absolute faith, a conviction that their cause was blessed by the gods. The sacred march northward, c. 760 BC. This was not a barbaric invasion. It was almost a religious procession. The first great city they reached was Aswan, the southern gateway of Egypt. The Egyptian guards saw this immense ebony black army approaching and cried out in panic, "The Nubians! The barbarians from the south are invading us." But Piye did exactly the opposite of what anyone expected from a conqueror. He sent heralds with a solemn message to the city's governor. "I am Piye, son of Amun, legitimate pharaoh of Kush and protector of Egypt's sacred traditions. Surrender without fighting, and you will keep your life, your position, your possessions, and your honor. Resist, and you will perish. But know this, I do not come to destroy, I come to restore." The news of Piye's mercy and justice spread like wildfire. Local governors quickly understood they were dealing with a pious, just, and merciful king. And the cities fell one after another with hardly any fighting. Aswan surrendered in a single day. Edfu in 2 days. Esna in 3 days. Then came the historic moment. Thebes, the city of Amun, the spiritual capital of the ancient world, threw open its gates and welcomed Piye as a savior. The priests of the temple of Amun-Ra, the most powerful in Egypt, bowed before him and proclaimed, "The ancient prophecies are fulfilled. From the south has come the black savior. He will restore Egypt's lost glory." Piye was crowned legitimate pharaoh in the very temple of Amun, the first black pharaoh in recorded history. The decisive battle of Memphis, the fall of the rebellious north. However, northern Egypt was not ready to accept a black sovereign. The Libyan king Tefnacht, master of the Delta, gathered a great coalition of princes and military leaders to resist the Nubian invader. The final confrontation took place at Memphis, the ancient administrative capital, a city of gigantic walls and countless temples. Piye's army, 20,000 men, faced a coalition of 40,000 Egyptians and Libyans. The battle was terrible and lasted 2 full days. On the first day, the defenders held firm behind Memphis's massive ramparts. On the second day, Piye executed a stroke of genius. Instead of attacking the impregnable walls head-on, he sent his finest Nubian archers up the Nile in hundreds of swift boats. They bypassed the city via the river and rained devastating arrows on the defenders caught from behind. Within hours, Memphis fell. The northern coalition collapsed like a house of cards. The princes surrendered one after another, and Tefnakht himself came to kneel before Piye, prostrate in the dust. The scene carried immense symbolic weight. A light-skinned Libyan king bowing before a black Nubian king, tears in his eyes, pleading, "Forgive me, O great pharaoh. I did not know you were sent by the gods." Piye, with rare magnanimity, forgave him and allowed him to govern part of the delta under his suzerainty. Then he spoke the words that have crossed the centuries. "I did not come to destroy Egypt. I came to resurrect it." Chapter 2. The Golden Age of the Black Pharaohs, the Sacred Renaissance, 760, 656 BC, Piye, the restorer of Egypt. For the first time in centuries, Egypt was unified under a single scepter. But this was not the scepter of a foreign conqueror thirsty for power. It was that of the 25th Kushite Dynasty, Black Pharaohs from the deep heart of Africa who ruled Egypt as true Egyptians, with almost religious respect for its traditions. Piye governed with exemplary piety. He restored dozens of ruined temples. He had new colossal statues of the gods carved. He reopened schools of scribes and revived the teaching of sacred hieroglyphs. He reinstated the great forgotten religious festivals, the Opet festival, the beautiful feast of the valley. Egyptian scribes engraved on temple walls. Piye, beloved of Amun, has restored Egypt's lost youth. Shabaqo, the pharaoh who saved memory. Upon Piye's death, his son Shabaqo ascended the throne. Even more ambitious than his father, he declared at his coronation, "I am not a foreign king occupying Egypt. I am a true Egyptian pharaoh." He moved the royal court from Napata to Memphis, the very heart of ancient Egypt. He spoke Egyptian fluently, adopted all pharaonic rituals, wore the double crown, and took a classic Egyptian throne name. But his most famous act was one of heritage preservation. In the Temple of Ptah in Memphis, he discovered an ancient stone inscribed with very damaged sacred texts dating back to the Old Kingdom. These texts were on the verge of being lost forever. Shabaqo ordered the complete transcription of these writings onto a new black basalt stela, so that the knowledge would never perish. This stela is known today as the Shabaqo Stone, one of the most precious documents in the history of Egyptian philosophy and religion. Taharqa the Great, the pinnacle of Kushite glory. After Shabaqo came Taharqa, the most famous and powerful of all the Black Pharaohs. He ruled 25 years over Egypt, and Kush combined and built more monuments than any other ruler in Egyptian history. But his reign was also marked by the greatest challenge the Kushites ever faced, the Assyrian Empire, the superpower of the age. The Assyrians, under Sennacherib and then Ashurbanipal, had conquered the entire Near East, and now turned their greedy eyes toward Egypt's riches. Taharqa climbed the ramparts of Thebes and proclaimed, "Never will these northern barbarians tread the sacred land of the pharaohs." He raised a colossal army of 50,000 men, Nubians, Egyptians, Libyan mercenaries, all united under Amun's banner. The legendary Battle of Tekten. The first great confrontation took place at Tekten in Palestine. Taharqa personally led his troops, tall, majestic. Standing on a golden chariot drawn by black horses, he embodied the god king himself. Facing him, the Assyrian army, the most powerful and disciplined in the ancient world, with mounted archers, heavy chariots, iron-armored spearmen. The battle lasted an entire day, a titanic clash. Nubian archers riddled the Assyrians with arrows. Egyptian cavalry charged and shattered their lines. Taharqa himself fought in the thick of the fray, slaying many enemies with his own hand. By the end of the day, the Assyrians were crushed and fled eastward. Taharqa returned triumphant to Thebes, carried on the people's shoulders as they sang, "Taharqa, the Black Lion, savior of Egypt, the Kushite Golden Age." Under Taharqa, Egypt and Kush experienced unprecedented prosperity. Nubian gold flowed in rivers. Caravans brought back ivory, ostrich feathers, incense, ebony, leopard skins. Artists created masterpieces, statues with athletic bodies and proud faces, reliefs depicting hunting scenes and victories. Architecture reached new heights. Taharqa built or enlarged temples at Thebes, Karnak, Luxor, Medinet Habu, but especially in Nubia. At Nuri, Kawa, Sanam, Gebel Barkal, he erected dozens of slender pyramids, taller and more pointed than those at Giza, blending Egyptian tradition with powerful Nubian aesthetics. The Kandakes, Africa's warrior queens. One of the most fascinating aspects of Kushite civilization is the extraordinary role of women. The queens, called Kandakes, were not mere royal wives. They were sovereign rulers in their own right, commanding armies, presiding over councils, performing sacred rituals. Amanirenas, after Taharqa, personally led her troops into battle and built some of the most beautiful Nubian temples. Amanishakheto ruled an independent kingdom and repelled several invasions with legendary bravery. This tradition of warrior queens lasted more than 1,000 years in Kush, an unmatched record in world history. The Assyrians return, and twilight begins. The Assyrians never accepted their defeat. Under Ashurbanipal, they raised a monstrous army of 70,000 men, equipped with forged iron weapons, siege towers, and giant battering rams. This time, they broke through Egypt's defenses. Thebes was sacked, Memphis fell a second time. Taharqa, old and ill, was forced to retreat south, his heart broken. The end of the Egyptian dream. After 20 more years of desperate fighting, the last Kushite pharaoh in Egypt, Tanutamani, made a heartbreaking decision. Egypt no longer deserves the blood of our sons. He sailed south up the Nile, carrying the sacred statues, treasures, and relics of the ancient pharaohs. Kushite rule over Egypt ended, but the story of Kush was far from over. Chapter 3, Return to the Roots, the Empire of Meroe, 656 BC, 350 AD. Aspelta, the pure Nubian Renaissance. In Napata, King Aspelta ascended the throne and declared, "We have lost Egypt, but we have not lost our soul. We will build a pure, proud, independent Kushite civilization." He launched a vast movement of return to origins. The Meroitic language became the official tongue. Egyptian hieroglyphic writing gradually gave way to the original Meroitic alphabet. Temples were built in an assertive Nubian style, squat pylons, columns with black lotus capitals, statues with strongly Negroid features. Kushite religion flourished, honoring both the Egyptian Amun and ancient African deities, Apademak, the lion god, Amisemi, the falcon-headed goddess. The great transfer to Meroe. Aspelta's successors made a fateful strategic decision: move the capital to Meroe on the banks of the Blue Nile. Meroe was the perfect site, at the crossroads of trade routes linking sub-Saharan Africa, the Red Sea, and the Mediterranean. Immensely rich in very high-quality iron ore, the Kushites had now mastered iron metallurgy to perfection. Meroe became a gigantic industrial center. Hundreds of furnaces roared day and night, producing weapons, tools, and art objects exported as far as India and China. Meroe is sometimes called the Birmingham of ancient Africa. Shanakdakhete, the queen who defied Rome. In the 2nd century BC, an exceptional woman ascended the throne, the Kandake Shanakdakhete. Tall, powerful, charismatic, she personally led her armies and treated the greatest rulers as equals. Under her reign, the Meroitic Empire reached its greatest extent, north to the Roman borders, south to the sources of the White Nile, east to the Red Sea ports, west to the kingdoms of Darfur and Kordofan. Meroe became the capital of a true continental African empire, the war against Rome. When the Romans conquered Egypt in 30 BC, they immediately coveted Nubian gold and riches. The Roman prefect Gaius Petronius sent an arrogant ultimatum to Shanakdakhete: submit to Rome or suffer the wrath of the legions. She answered with action. She raised a massive army and launched a surprise offensive against Aswan and Syene. The first battle of Aswan, 100,000 Nubian warriors crossed the Nile at night. At sunrise, they fell upon the Roman garrison like lightning. Aswan fell in one day, Cyania the next. Shanakdakhete then ordered the systematic destruction of Augustus's statues in both cities. The bronze head of an imperial statue was brought back to Meroe and buried beneath the steps of the royal palace, trampled daily by the people, an act of incredible symbolic defiance. The Roman revenge and the historic treaty furious, Petronius raised 25,000 elite legionaries and marched south. The decisive battle took place near Napata. It lasted 3 days of ferocious fighting. The Romans used their famous turtle formations and heavy siege engines. The Nubians countered with mobile guerrilla tactics, precise archers, and perfect knowledge of the terrain. The Romans won, but at what cost? 10,000 dead, and Petronius himself wounded. He understood that a total conquest of Kush would be a disaster for Rome. Negotiations opened on the sacred island of Philae. Shanakdakhete negotiated from a position of strength. The final treaty was a diplomatic masterpiece, a neutral buffer zone between the two empires, free and flourishing trade. Above all, Rome officially recognized the Kingdom of Meroe as a sovereign and equal state, the Meroitic Golden Age. A period of peace and exceptional prosperity then began. Caravans laden with gold, ivory, iron, and incense crossed the desert. The arts reached rare perfection. Finely chiseled gold jewelry, painted pottery, statues with enigmatic smiles. The Meroitic language acquired its own script, the oldest original sub-Saharan African writing system. Sciences flourished: medicine, astronomy, mathematics applied to irrigation and agriculture. The great Kandakes, the Amanirenas, built the most majestic temples in Nubian history. Amanishakheto expanded the kingdom westward. Nauwidamak ruled alongside her husband as a true co-sovereign. These women commanded armies, promulgated laws, negotiated with Rome, at a time when women elsewhere in the world were often relegated to silence. Meroe, the wonder of ancient Africa. At its peak, Meroe was one of the greatest metropolises of the ancient world. 100,000 inhabitants, red sandstone palaces with sculpted facades, immense temples with pylons painted in brilliant colors, more than 200 slender pyramids, more numerous than all those in Egypt combined, a massive industrial zone with hundreds of blast furnaces whose roar could be heard miles away, a cosmopolitan market where merchants from India, China, Rome, Arabia, and Punt gathered, a great library containing thousands of scrolls and tablets, preserving the knowledge of Africa, Egypt, and the Mediterranean world. Meroe was not just a city, it was a miracle of civilization at the heart of the Black Continent. Chapter 4. The End of the Legend, 350–550 AD. The First Signs of Decline. Like all great civilizations, Meroe knew its autumn. From the 3rd century AD onward, cracks appeared. Trade routes shifted. The Red Sea became the main route to India and the Far East. The Christian kingdom of Aksum, modern Ethiopia, emerged as a formidable rival power. Rome weakened and bought less African gold and ivory. The economy, heavily dependent on trade, began to falter. Then came peripheral invasions, nomadic Saharan tribes from the west, Nubian pastoral peoples from the Kordofan Mountains, Blemmyes east of the Nile launching incessant raids. The Meroitic army, designed for great pitched battles, struggled against these fast and elusive guerrillas. Ezana of Aksum, the fatal blow. The death blow came from the southeast. The Christian kingdom of Aksum, led by King Ezana. Ezana was a brilliant strategist. He studied Meroe's weaknesses for years and prepared his offensive meticulously. Around 350 AD, he crossed the Blue Nile with 30,000 Aksumite warriors. Ultra-mobile light infantry, expert cavalry, elite archers. The last Meroitic king, Taharqa Mani, raised what remained of the Kushite army, 20,000 men, the final guard of a millennial civilization. The last battle of Meroe. It took place beneath the very walls of the capital. It lasted only 1 day. The Meroites, bound by their ancient tactics, could not withstand the speed and modernity of the Aksumite army. Taharqa Mani fell in battle. His army was scattered. Ezana entered victorious Meroe. But instead of looting or burning it, he did something extraordinary. He ordered the city emptied of its inhabitants and left it deserted. He declared, "This is a sacred place. We will not destroy Africa's history." The silent disappearance. The Kushite people did not vanish suddenly. They blended into surrounding tribes, migrated north to Egypt or south into modern Sudan. The Meroitic language was forgotten. Its script disappeared. Royal traditions faded away. In barely a century, the greatest civilization in Africa after Egypt vanished, like a dream upon waking. The centuries-long oblivion. For more than 1,000 years, the world almost completely forgot the Kushite Empire. Arab chroniclers vaguely mentioned ancient Nubian kingdoms. When Europeans rediscovered the ruins of Meroe in the 19th century, many refused to believe that a black people could have created such grandeur. They attributed the pyramids, temples, and palaces to Egyptians, Arabs, or mysterious civilizations. Even today, how many people know that? Black pharaohs ruled Egypt for 100 years. African queens stood up to the Roman Empire and forced them to sign a treaty of equality. An African civilization built more than 200 pyramids, mastered iron long before many others, and was a global cultural and commercial crossroads. Conclusion: an erased heritage and eternal lessons. Close your eyes one last time. We have traveled together from the modest palaces of Kerma to the silent ruins of Meroe. More than 1,400 years of history buried beneath the sands. What profound lessons have the Kushites left us? Lesson 1. Greatness often arises where least expected. Who could have imagined that a people from the depths of Black Africa would become the savior of the world's greatest known civilization? They were not the richest, nor the most numerous, nor the most technologically advanced at the start, but they had the strongest determination, the deepest respect for tradition, and absolute faith in their mission. Lesson: never judge a people, a person, a nation by appearance or origin. True greatness is internal. Lesson 2: learning from others is strength. Blind imitation is weakness. The Kushites studied Egypt with humility and admiration. They learned its language, arts, religion, administration, but never renounced their identity. They added their African genius, brighter colors, more assertive features, more telluric spirituality. Lesson: drawing inspiration from others is wisdom. Creating one's own path is genius. Lesson 3. A true civilization honors its past and builds the future. Piye, Shabaqo, and Taharqa did not plunder Egypt. They restored it, beautified it, loved it as their own land. Lesson: a great civilization does not destroy what came before it. It preserves, repairs, and builds upon it. Lesson 4. The power of a society that frees its women. The Kushite Kandakes governed, commanded armies, negotiated with Rome. More than 2,000 years before Europe granted women the same rights. Lesson: any society that gives power, education, and freedom to its women becomes infinitely stronger. Lesson 5. History is written by the victors, and sometimes distorted by prejudice. The story of Kush was erased, minimized, rewritten for centuries, because some could not bear the idea that a black people had created such a brilliant civilization. Lesson: always be wary of official history. Seek buried truths. Always ask, who benefits from hiding this story? Final message to you. The Kushites showed us that greatness has no skin color, no border, no assigned era. A civilization can be born and shine anywhere on earth. True power comes from the heart, from will, from hard work, from faith in oneself, not from outward appearance. You too carry these same seeds of greatness within you. They are there, buried in your soul, waiting for you to water them. The only question that truly matters is this: will you nourish them through effort, perseverance, and self-confidence? Or will you let them die from fear, doubt, and hesitation? The Kushites chose the path of greatness despite every imaginable obstacle. And you? Which path will you choose? Now, fall asleep in peace. Dream of black pharaohs seated on golden thrones. Dream of Kandakes leading armies against the mightiest empires. Dream of the pyramids of Meroe sparkling under the African sun like eternal flames. And when you open your eyes tomorrow morning, remember, the greatness of Kush still flows in the veins of every African. and in the veins of every human being who dares to dream bigger than the world allows. The dreams of kings never begin with an army. They begin with a single courageous heart. And that heart, perhaps it is yours. Good night, and may your dreams be as vast as those of the Black Pharaohs.